And a lot of folks are living in fear. They're living in fear of what's going on in our country, what's going on in the world. And a lot of believers, a lot of followers of Jesus are worried, anxious, and fearful about the future. Maybe the fears are founded, but the question is, what do you do with fear? Someone has said that fear, FEAR, stands for false evidence is appearing real. Good morning, LaRue, but you also probably like the one that I heard somewhere else, but is my favorite, is that fear stands for forget everything and run. And I think that's what fear causes a lot of us to want to do. When something happens, when a triggering event occurs, if we're cornered, if we feel like we don't have any options, fear sets in and it grips us, and then we don't know what to do next because we're unsure and uncertain of the future. Fear can cause all kinds of issues for us. In fact, I had written a few down this morning, and the fear causes anxiety with us. It causes us to feel insecure. It causes us to, I got my mind map here. It will cause us often to, we'll feel like maybe we've got imposter syndrome. There's so many different things that it can do to us. Fear of people start to find out that we're not who we say we are, that kind of stuff. There's so much that can happen with fear, and it can grip us. And then when it grips us, some other like strange things start to happen to us. It's like it grips us. It's like and it taunts us. Fear can taunt us. The fear maybe it could be something we were programmed with in our past. We could be programmed of not going out and trying something because we're fearful that the outcome won't be what we thought. We'll be embarrassed. We'll lose money. We'll lose face. We'll lose relationships. We'll lose. You can fill in the blank. So there's that fear that creates sort of that insecurity, but it sort of taunts us at times. It's like it's right there, taunting, and then sometimes it'll just haunt us. It is so overwhelming. We feel like we're being overcome by a force somewhere else that is just that we have no control over and that we don't understand it. And so fear can keep us from experiencing God's best for us. Fear can keep us from living life. I think that's. I'm doing a service today for someone who is 60. I am approaching 60, and it's always causes me to become a bit pensive, more than pensive, a bit introspective, because the question is always, anytime I've done a service in somebody's in my age bracket, is that not that I fear death. I don't, for whatever reason, I guess because I've been by the bedside of so many people. I don't think anybody wants to die. I think that I don't fear death itself. I think probably we all fear more the process of dying because we don't know how it's going to happen and when, and we don't want to be in pain or whatever. We don't want to be a problem to our children. We don't want to be incompatible. There's so many different things that can happen with that. But I think my biggest fear, and I've seen this happen from people, is having not lived, having not taken the risks, done the things, lived in the places, made the choices that that maybe would have caused things to be a bit different. And so but it's very easy, especially when you're moving along, to start to get discontented and to say, geez, I'm discontented right now, but fear may keep us from moving forward. And sometimes discontent, you can let it disorient you, or you can let it be something that's going to move you ahead and cause positive change. But a lot of times, about the time we want to make that positive change, fear sets in. And it's interesting because the question has always been, how do you overcome fear? What do you do with fear? How do you work with it so that you can continue to move ahead? And I think that there's a passage I'm going to look at in a minute in Joshua 1, but I think when people, early on when I would get up to speak and I would feel butterflies, which by the way, they never go away. The joke is that you always feel the butterflies, you just get them to fly in formation, so it's a little bit different. Different crowds. If I have a different crowd that I'm speaking in front of, the nerves, and even if you watch my heart rate on my watch on Sunday morning, the heart rate goes up to what my resting heart rate normally is and sustains at a certain level until I come back down off of that. So it's amazing. We all have that anxiety when we're doing different things. But the biggest thing is when people say, well, how do you do it? Well, first of all, it's scheduled. I'm the speaker and I don't have a choice. So whether I'm fearful, whether I'm down, whether I'm discouraged, whether I'm sad, whether I'm happy, whether I'm joyful, whether I've been arguing with people, regardless of what's been said to me, guess what? At 9:45 and 11 a.m., I've got to put all of that aside, and regardless of what's being felt at that moment, I have something that has to be done. And I think that's an important distinction, that often fear will allow fear to stop us from moving, to keep us from doing what needs to be done. In Joshua 1, just an interesting thing has taken place. Moses has died. Joshua had been Moses' right-hand man for all of these years. Joshua had been the guy who was there for Moses all along, and God had actually told Moses, listen, when you're gone, Joshua's going to be the guy. It was no surprise to Joshua. It was no surprise to Moses. Now, what's interesting is Joshua had always been a guy that, even though he was sort of second in command, had always been the guy that was there. You didn't hear him complaining. Even when he and Caleb were the only two of the 12 spies that went in to the promised land, they came back and said, no, we can go in, we can do this. And the other 10 said, no, the people are too big, we don't have the resources, we're not going to be able to do this. And Joshua and Caleb were like, no, we can. And it was Joshua who was the can-do guy, who was the military strategist, who had the right attitude, that was the guy that even when the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, he paid the price for their disobedience. So even though he didn't disobey God, their disobedience impacted him, and he wandered for 40 years in the wilderness, even though he was one of the two people that believed. And so sometimes, I just want to say this, first of all, sometimes we're going to think life is unfair. Somebody else has done something that has impacted us. And it could be, you could be complaining about what your parents did or didn't do, what society has done or didn't do to you, what your ancestry's done or didn't do to you, all of those kinds of things. You can go on and on and on about, I didn't have enough of this, I didn't have enough of that, blah, 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 blah. And you can complain about all of it. But the bottom line is, here was Joshua, the guy who was leadership material that God was preparing. And I would submit to you that even in those 40 years that they wandered in the wilderness, and Joshua was there, that during those 40 years of wandering, 40 years, 40 years, half of an average life, he spent wandering. Good morning, Bobby. Is that crazy or what? And it wasn't his fault. But he spent time in the wilderness. And a lot of good leaders wind up having to do that, where there's just so much going on. And then remember, as the story of Moses went, Moses was, in the end, because he had disobeyed God, God told him, sorry, dude. God didn't say it like that, but sorry, dude, you're not going into the promised land. You're going to get to see it, but that's it. You will not get to enter. So Moses dies while he's looking at the promised land, and God taps Joshua and says, okay, my friend, it's time. And we pick that up in Joshua 1. And it says this: after the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Notice, even though Moses had failed God, God still said, Moses is my servant, and he's dead. And then he says, therefore, I love this, the time has come for you. Like that. The time has come for you. Joshua, this is your time. This is your time to now lead these people, the Israelites, watch this, across the Jordan River into the land that I'm giving them. I promise you what I promised Moses. So now God says to him, Joshua, time has come. It's here. Your time is here. So many people are waiting on their time to get here. And sometimes you're going to feel like you're wandering. You're going to be angered. You're going to be fearful. You're going to feel like you're going around in circles. You're going to wonder if anything's ever going to come to fruition. And fear can set in that it's never going to happen. And so all of a sudden, God takes Moses, and now he says to Joshua, listen, it's time. Your time is now here. This is it. This is your hour. And he says, I'm going to promise you, verse 3, what I promised Moses. Wherever you set foot, you will be on land that I've given you, from the Negev wilderness in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, including all the land of the Hittites. Then he says this, Joshua, listen, no one, verse 5, will be able to stand against you for as long as you live. For I will be with you as I was with Moses. I'm not going to fail you or abandon you. Joshua knew that, because in the 40 years they wandered in the wilderness, even though it was Israel's fault, God fed and gave them food and water and provided for them the entire time. Now notice what he says. Be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land I swore to their ancestors I would give them. And he says, be strong and very courageous. Now, when it says be strong, some translations say, fear not. There's so many fear nots in the Bible, the way that it's written. But he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to not just not fear. I want you to have courage. I guarantee you that the old Spartans and anybody that you talk to, Navy SEALs, things of that nature, before they go into battle, there are certain breathing techniques and things that they have to use to have what's called situational awareness and to calm themselves, because it's up here. There's a certain bit of trepidation that goes on in every time they go onto the battlefield. Every time something happens, they've got to manage that. And the idea is that so many of us let fear stop us. And he says, look, you're going to fear. There's going to be that feeling. But remember this, I'm with you. And he says, so I want you to be courageous. And be courageous means I need you to keep moving. Because regardless of how you're feeling about what's going on or what's not happening, regardless of what's going on inside you, listen to this, Joshua. He says, I need you to keep moving. You're going to have to march into the promised land. Remember that you got to keep stepping, and every step that you take, every piece of land that you step on, I'm going to give you. And so then he says this, be strong, courageous. He says, be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. And then he says this. He says, remember what Moses did. He says, now, remember what Moses taught you. Not necessarily what Moses did, but he says, don't turn to the left or the right. Don't deviate. There can be no deviation when you start to move. And then he adds this, study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night, so you will be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, because fear starts and then discouragement sets in. And he says, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now, I know people have made this promise and this claim for themselves that God is with us. And actually, we have New Testament evidence of that Jesus is with us. We've talked about it the past few Sundays about the Parakletos in John, when Jesus said, I'm going to send you another comforter, another consoler, another advocate, a Parakletos, one like me, who's going to be beside you. And he told the disciples and told all of us, I'm never going to leave you. I'm with you. So the beautiful thing is that when we have Jesus in our lives, we have the presence of God with us, guiding us, comforting us, helping us, being an ever-present help to us. So he tells Joshua, the one thing that I think is really interesting, he says, study this book of instruction. Now, I know that people will take this and say that means study the Bible. And there's a principle that we can do. They didn't have the Bible. They didn't even have all of the Torah at that point. They had the instruction book that God had given Moses, and Moses had it and had passed it on. And he says to Joshua, listen, study it. Immerse yourself in it. Meditate in it. And it's the word meditate is an interesting term, because meditation is one of those things today where people go, oh yes, I meditate, I empty my mind. And meditation here means to turn over and over and over. The term used to be about a cow chewing the cud, where they keep bringing it back up and putting it back down, and bringing it back up and putting it back down, and chewing on it some more and chewing on it some more and thinking about it some more. And the idea is he's saying, look, I need you to think about and to inculcate, to make part and parcel of who you are, this book of instruction. Because when you follow it, you will find success. When you follow it, and you don't deviate from it, then you're going to be prosperous, and you're going to be the person that you are supposed to be. I love when he says, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged, because I'm here. So it's so interesting to me that, and the command was not to be discouraged, that it's easy for discouragement to set in. And I would submit to you, it's easy for discouragement to set in when we sit there and we immerse ourselves in the fear. When you think about what fear happens, it happens between here, and we start to create these monsters. We start to create, what happens if this happens, and then we create worst case scenarios, and we think about all of the negative stuff that could happen, and what if, and we'll take it to the nth degree, to where we'll never leave our house. What if I go out of the house and I get this? What if I go out of the house in this house? What if I go out of the house and I get hit by a car? And there are people that literally won't go out of their houses, not because of coronavirus, but because they're afraid of everything that is going on out there, and so it has stifled their lives. Fear can do that to us. And the reason why it does is because we are meditating more on the fear than we are on faith. And so what God tells Joshua is, look, you got to have the courage to keep stepping. You got to have the courage to, good morning, Karen. You got to have the courage to make sure that you are taking this and putting this over and over and over in your mind, so it becomes part and parcel. In other words, what are you thinking about? If you are dwelling and meditating on fear, on what could go wrong, on all of the bad stuff, on what's in it for me, then that is what you are going to produce in your life, and it will discourage you, dismay you, destroy you, damage you, every D word you can possibly think of. But we also have the example of Joshua, where he says, look, I want to remind you, follow what Moses taught you. Take the book and take the instructions and meditate on them and do what they say, and then you're going to stay on the right path. And I think that's so true for us. And we're not talking about the 10 Commandments. I mean, honestly, this thing of following Jesus is simple, but it's not easy. When everybody goes, well, there's a lot of the Bible to memorize. Well, there is. But how about starting these two things? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said on these two things hung all the law and the prophets. That if you can just love God vertically, love people, and remember the two are connected. I can say that I love God, but if I'm not loving people, then I'm not loving God. Because they are created in his image. And I think about that so often when we've talked about this destruction of people, this destruction of reputations and of people and their political views and who they are, that those are the people, those people that we are doing that to are people that God created, and more importantly, a person for whom Christ died. And so if we can start to view people through that lens, it causes us to maybe look at things a little bit differently. But fear, what do you fear? What is the thing that you fear the most? Don't say it, but you know what it is. And it probably, when it could be something from your childhood, it could be something from something that you saw on TV, something that you experienced. And so it's the thing that fear is the thing that makes you want to forget everything and run. I just want to run away. I want to go. That's it. I want to get out of here. that's the thing that you have to now say, okay, what does God say about this? What does he want me to do? How does he want me to function? And how does he want me to move ahead? It's important because fear can disrupt and destroy our lives. And so today we have to start building up the faith by changing what we think about, by thinking about who Jesus is, who he was, and what he wants us to do. And that will change everything. So I'm so glad that you joined us